Hi, welcome back. I'm Naren. In this video, we will check out how you can prepare for Kickstart. If you are planning to participate in Kickstart but not sure whether you're ready for that or not, we will check out some of these steps in this video which can help you at least start participating in the Kickstart and improve with your performance. And some of the highlights that we will be covering in this video are how you can bootstrap yourself so that you can start participating in the Kickstart. And please note that this will be just your first step, and this will be a long journey if you are not comfortable with decoding or solving these kind of problems. But this video should help you just start with your first step. And the idea is you need to improve in steps, whether it is in participating in the Kickstart or in any coding competition or even in your regular coding skills or problem solving skills. So we will just with this video try that first step, and then we can improve as it progresses. And we will also check out one sample coding environment. In this case, I will just show you my Visual Studio Code on Windows, working on C++ program. And also we will check out the data sets, the characteristics of the data sets in the Kickstart problems, and also we will take one sample problem and solve it, and also code it, show the code at least in the VS Code, how it works there, and submit it in Kickstart website and see the results on the website. So first we will take a look at the Visual Studio Code app on Windows with a sample program, and just building and running it on the Visual Studio. So let's check it out. So I'm using Visual Studio Code on my Windows system, and these are the extensions that I have, which are not many. And here you can, on the left side, you can browse through a directory where you are having your code and working on them. In this case, I'm just have open sample2.cpp. Note that if I build it, it builds .exe with the same name, the same directory that I can use to run. And I'll be using a terminal to run the code. And in terminal, you can check the configure default build task, and we will be using the G++ compiler, and this is the sample config for that, like the arguments it will be used while using the G++ command. And I have just included one bits std_c++.h so that you don't have to worry too much about including each and every .h file based on the code that you use. And we are using the namespace standard, and you'll just have a main method, and if you want you can add more functions and all based on the complexity of the solution. And each Kickstart problem, it will be in the definition of the problem itself. The input initially will be number of test cases, so you will just read using cin and store it in, say, variable t. Then for each test case you have to read the input, solve it, and output the results. That will be the simplest way to process, instead of storing the results of all test cases and then dumping the output at the end, because then you will be unnecessarily consuming memory and all. So just go through each test case, then read whatever may be the inputs defined for that test case in that problem. In this case, I'm just reading one integer n as an input for each test case. I will just define n and cin into that n, and there is no processing in this because it is just a sample code I'm showing for Visual Studio Code. So assuming you have calculated something as a result, and in this case I'm just assuming n itself is the result, so I will just print that this std out with cout with case hash and then the test case and then a colon, and then this is how the output structure should be, and this will be part of the problem definition itself. But once, and also a new line after each test case result. And once you have this some sample code, you can easily copy paste and then just think about finding the solution and implementing it. And to build this, I'll just click terminal and run build task. So in the terminal it is building, as you can see here below, and it says it build finished successfully. Now I will again use the terminal to run this. So here I can do plus to create another terminal. In this case I have already another terminal, so I'll just select the drop down and pick the PowerShell. So here you can see that I am in the directory Kickstart, that is where my sample2 CPP is, and this build created a .exe with the same name in the same directory. So I'll just run that sample2.exe from the Kickstart. And once I run it, it is expecting, as we have coded, the number of test cases seen as the first one. I will just say 2 as the test case number. And now it is looping through each test case and it is expecting n as an input for each one. I will use 5 and 7 as n for 2 test cases. I will enter 5 as the first test case n, and note that before coming into the loop for taking next input, it would have calculated, or in this case nothing to calculate, it will print out the output for the test case. That means 5 will be printed as soon as I enter 5 and enter. So it printed the result for the first test case. Now it is expecting the input from the second test case. I will just input 7 and enter, and it has displayed the output for the second test case and it exited. So this is how you will you will build and then input test cases and check the outputs for the correctness of your program. So we'll go back to our presentation. So you have seen how you can use the Visual Studio, just a glance on that. So next will be the dataset sizes that is normally set in each of the test set of various Kickstart problems. If you look at a sample problem of the Kickstart, you will see a section on the limit, and the limits will normally say about some time limits for the solution to work, the finish within that timeline while running that program, or the memory limit, the maximum memory it should use. It should not cross that memory limit. And also for some of the variables like number of test cases or the number of the input sizes for various problems will have some limits, and those limits are specified in the problem definition. Normally you will see test set 1 and test set 2 for each of the problem. Test set 1 will be a smaller size test set, and test set 2 will be for the bigger data size. And you will normally see these numerical limits, and While implementing, you will be using the integer variables to represent these things, like whether it is an array to store those data, or while computing some of the values for the input variables, input content. So you should be aware of those limits, and based on that you should use the integer variables in the programming language that you're working on. And this is needed because if you use some variables that cannot store this max as specified, then your answer may be incorrect. So for the correctness of the solution, when the inputs are around that maximum range, you need to use the proper integers which can store that maximum numbers. And also, if you should not use a type which is more than sufficient. Like if you can work with say int32, don't use with int64, because unnecessarily you'll be using more memory, and if it is like a repeated field and all, you might hit the memory limits, like say 1 GB. If they have specified the memory limit, normally they will specify in the problem definition. And also it can even affect your latency, the time it takes to complete, because there will be time limit within which your program has to finish. So we will just take a look at one sample like tips for the integer variables in C++. Like if it says 10 to the power of 9 or 10 to the power of 18 and all as the max limit, what are the integer variables that you can use? So let's check it out. So this document lists some tips for using integers for different max limits. So this, like if you have prepared this in advance, it helps you blindly use some of these variables instead of thinking about that while solving the problem. So just I normally just use the int versions, and yeah, whenever in the problem statement, if you see that if it is less than or equal to 10 power 9, you can just go with int32, because it supports a max limit of this much, which is 2 into 10 power 9, and a bit more than that. It's more like 2.147 into 10 power 9. So whenever they say max limit is 10 power 9, int32 is fine. If they say max limit is 10 power 18, int64 is fine, because int64 supports 9.223 into 10 power 18. And if it is always less than 32,000 plus, and then you can always use int16, and if it is too low, like less than 127, int8. And yeah, one is like to make sure that it covers the max limit, and another one is not to use a higher one if it is not needed, to avoid memory usage unnecessarily. So to summarize, normally in these kind of problems in Kickstart, you will see that some integer max limit will be at 10 less than or equal to 10 power 9. So whenever it says 10 power 9, feel free to use int32 as the integer variable. It should be sufficient for you to store at least even slightly more than 10 power 9. And if suppose any problem says the max limit is 10 power 18, then you can safely use int64. And for the other two cases, if the number is within 32,767, you can use int16, and if it is 127, that's int8. So this is just one tip related to the integer max limits. Similarly, if you see any such patterns or something where you need to prepare, because if you are not ready with these things, you will be spending your valuable time of the 3-hour limit of each Kickstart competition by thinking about these things. So it's always good you are prepared with these things ahead of time before the competition starts. So now we will look at one sample problem from earlier Kickstart rounds. So we will check the last year 2020 round H, and we will take the first problem in that called retype, and we will go through that problem definition. Then we will try to solve it by maybe visualizing the problem or like summarizing the problem and thinking about a solution. It should be a simple problem, and then we will check out the code in Visual Studio Code and try to run it like with input and output, and we will just have this some simple code snippet for taking the input and printing the output, so that you can just copy paste for any of the problems without worrying too much about reading the input, outputting the result. So we will check out the problem in the Kickstart and website, and also we will use the Visual Studio Code and try to run the sample code for that. So we are looking at the retype Kickstart problem. It says, after spending many hours studying for programming competitions, you decided to take a rest and play video games. You're currently playing an adventure game called Kickstart. Note that this is just a story you can read. It is a game, so that is just enough. It's a game has n levels, and you're currently on the 8th level. So just start noting down the key things, like there are n levels and you are on the 8th level. So those two are the important points till now, and unfortunately you just realized that to beat the boss at the final level you will need a special sword which can be picked up at level S, and you have already completed that level but you forgot to pick up the sword at that level. So that means, so there is a in between level. Let's say these are the levels starting from 1 to n, and you are at 8th level. It says there is another level, say X, and that level has some sword which you really needed to beat your boss at the end. But you forgot to pick up that at levels, and you have already reached level K. So how do you pick up the sword and finish the game? That is the continuation of the problem. So if you go back to the problem definition, now you want to pick up the sword and finish the game in the least amount of time possible, and for that you have two options. So one is to finish the game, another one is to finish it fast. So there are two options. One is restart the game and complete all levels again starting from level 1. So what does that mean? So the first option is you are at the level A here, and you just want to exit the game, go back to level 1 and then continue till level n, assuming you pick this sword at level S and continue to n. So that is our first solution. And if you go back to the problem, the second option for the solution is you don't exit the game. Instead, because when you exit the game, you will go to the level 1 and continue. Instead, you will try to go back each step till you reach level S instead of exiting. Because what if level S is nearby to level K instead of level 1? Because then you might need less time. And again, that context comes into picture when you read at the end about how each step takes time. So the second option, now again you can summarize and visualize it. Move to the previous levels until you reach level S, pick up this sword and then complete all the remaining levels starting from level S. So coming back to our visualization, the second option, in the second option you won't exit. You are in K. Now you will go back till S and pick up this sword, and then you again continue from S till level N. So the green color thing is the second option, whereas red color is the first option. Going back to the problem definition, so every time you enter a level you have to exit it. It's like there's no jumping level. Either by completing it or going for the next level, or by moving to the previous level, or by finishing exiting the chain. You can ignore most of these descriptions, just assume that there is no special cases here for jumping. Exiting any level takes 1 minute. This is important, so that L minutes is needed for L levels. So that means when you are in level K, that means you have started from level 1 and reached level K. That means you have taken K minutes. And if you start from level 1 and reach level N, you take N minutes. If you start from level 1 and reach level S, you take S minutes. If you start from S level and reach K level, then you take K minus S minutes. If you start from K level and reach N level, you take N minus K minutes. So that is the whole point of that description, because you need to use that formulas for calculating which one is faster, which one end up with a lower value of the minutes. So you can see that the red one is the option 1 and red 2 is the green one, and what it means about 1 minute per level is, if you start from level 1 and reach level N, you take 10 minutes. If you start from level 1 then reach level S, you take S minutes. And from S to K, you take K minus S minutes. From K to N, you take N minus K minutes. So that is useful for calculating how much time you take. Going back to the description, your task is to discover which option would result in the least amount of total time to finish the game, including time you have already spent. Okay, coming back to the visualization, you are already in level K. That means you have already taken K minutes. Now for the option 1, which is red, you are already in level K. That means you have taken 10 minutes, and now you will exit and go to the level 1 and just continue till S, pick up this 4, continue till N. So that means you will again go from 1 to N. That means you will take K already you took at the current position. Now you exited and you again went from 1 to N. So total time taken in option 1 is K plus N. Now for the option 2, you are at K. That means again you have already taken K. Now you want to go back till S. So that is how much time you take from K to S, which is same as S to K, is K minus S. So you will need K minus S time to reach from K to S. And you will pick up this 4 in the option 2, and now you will continue from S to N. So that is N minus S. You take N minus S more to reach from S to N. So in option 2, you will take K plus K minus S plus N minus S, which will be 2K minus S plus N minus S, that is 2K 2S plus N is 2 into K minus S plus N is the time you will take in option 2. So the solution is just calculating these two, K plus N and 2 into K minus S plus 1 plus N, and find the minimum of those two and print it out as the. And if you go back to the problem description, you will check out the inputs, which is like the first input will be the number of test cases, and then you will read NK and S as the three variables, and then the output will be in the form of case hash, case number, test case number, colon, and then y is the result. That is how much time it took. Also note down the limits, like time limit is 10 seconds, 20 seconds. This won't help much while coding, but yeah, if you hit the time limit and all, you won't have to optimize, but this is a very simple problem. You won't hit that. And also note that the number of test cases is always less than or equal to 100. And while it says that S is always less than K and K is always less than N, so you don't have to worry too much about some of the cases here. And test set N is less than 2000, which is easy. But yeah, test set 2 says it is 10 power 9. So make sure that you use int 32 for N. And if you use int 32 for N, yeah, you can do the same thing for S and K. And they also mention a special sample input with 2 test cases, and also what should be the output, so which can be used to test your code. And they have described the output for this to understand. If you don't understand the problem clearly, you can read through and make sure that your understanding is. So let's check out in the Visual Studio Code. So this is the sample code for the retype problem. It's like you will just read the T first as number of test cases, then you will just go through the loop for each test case. And the problem definition says it you have to input N, K, and S in that order. So you just read it into 3 different variables, and as I said, it's N is max 10 power 9, so we're using int 32 for all these test cases. Definitely you don't need int 32, but it's fine because it's only one variable. Now we need to calculate option 1. So we have seen that option 1 solution is K plus N, and option 2 solution is 2 into K minus S plus 1. So we just calculate these two and we find the answer as min of those two options. And note here, like we are just using the min method. So the answer will have, again make sure you have int 32 for answer also. And you will just print it out with cout case hash colon num hash test case, then colon space, and then you print the answer, then a new line, and go to the next test case. So this is the sample code, and you can build it. So it generates sample.exe, it's building, and build is successful. Go to PowerShell, and this is the sample.exe, and I will enter test cases. And I will enter this sample test case from the problem definition. So it has two test cases, so I will enter 2. Then we need to enter NKS, which is 1052. So the result is 15 as expected. Next is 1076. And the result is 12 as expected. So this makes sure that our program or the implementation might be correct, and next is we can test it on Kickstart website. So we have seen how to approach a problem and how you can try out the solution in Visual Studio Code. And the last step, like when you have tried some of the test cases in the Visual Studio Code, you will be ready to test the code on the Kickstart website. That is the last one where you will have to upload and submit the code. You can also take a look at the FAQ that will have some interesting information related to the competition, like what are the languages that it supports and the various error codes and all. So you can upload the code that you prepared and tested on Visual Studio, and at least for the earlier problems, you can still submit the code in practice mode and run test cases. So that's what we will try here. But when you are competing, there won't be like a practice mode. You will just submit the code. And you can also read more about the points, how you get the points and all, because how fast you submit will carry some weightage, and also if the failed attempts will also carry some, you will lose some marks for that. So we will check out in the Kickstart website with our sample program that we have seen, and we will check the results. So once you try your solution in Visual Studio Code, you can come back to Kickstart website so that you can upload your code and test it. So this is the Kickstart page for retype problem, where on the left side you will see the problem definition with input, output and limits, and the sample test case, whereas on the right side window you will see an option to copy paste your code or even upload file. So we will paste the code that we copied from Visual Studio Code that we have already tested, and make sure you copy the entire code and you won't miss any parentheses and all, which can result in build failure. So once you do that, note that have syntax pre-check on, and don't submit the code. First try to test in the test run mode. You can just try the sample test case. So if you select the test run mode, it will give another window below to enter the test input sample. So I will just type whatever is there on the sample thing, which is 2 test cases of 10, 5, 2 and 10, 7, 6, and then I can just click run test. Now it, as you can see at the top, it says test 3. It is actually running. You can ignore the other attempts I have done previously. So this is the current attempt it is doing, and it is taking your code that you have pasted here and running the test case that you have typed here. Note that it is not running the final test cases that it needs to evaluate. So it is just testing whatever you have typed here, and it says whether it succeeded or not. Like it says it completed, and now you're good to go to submit the. Note that I have used, if it doesn't auto detect, you can select it as C++. So once, and here, since we have done the test run mode, we will unselect that so that it gives a submit attempt option here. So now I will click submit attempt. Now it takes your code and it is trying to run it against their Google's predefined set of test cases to evaluate your code. Note that here it shows it is running at what time and all, and it also gave the result as it says samples passed, and shows that test set 1 has passed, test set 2 has passed. And if it fails either for test 1, anyway it will stop there. If it succeeds in test 1 but fails at test 2, it will give an error code here instead of tick mark. Error code will be like WA, that means wrong answer. So that we will cover in the next class. So once you're done with this, you can this is the end of the one of that problem, and you can go to any another problem and start solving it. So we have seen how it works on the Kickstart website, and we have seen that the result was successful. But if there are any issues with your code, you will get different kind of errors. Normally it won't be like these are some of the error messages that you will get, but note that like for the wrong answer you won't, it might just display as WA, or for time limit exceeded it might say TLE, and for each of these it won't give any descriptive hints. So you should try to debug based on some idea about what this error source can be. Like if it is like compilation error related things, just cross check whether you have done the correct syntax and all correct coding. And normally if it is working on the Visual Studio Code, it should be fine because it is compiling there. But again, cross check whether you have, while copy pasting the code, you might have not copied it fully or missed some bracket. And if it is time limit exceeded, so definitely you might have to optimize your code, rethink about your algorithm and all, see whether there are any characteristics in the problem definition that you are not using in your solution, because that might help you to improve your algorithm. And if it is memory limited exceeded, please make sure that you are not unnecessarily storing information or unnecessarily building some intermediate data which is not needed. Wrong answer normally indicates that maybe you haven't covered all the cases properly in your solution. There may be some corner cases or some special cases which are not obvious in the sample test cases mentioned in the Kickstart problem. So you need to understand the problem and think about all the scenarios, test scenarios, so that you can cover those cases in your implementation. So to summarize, we looked at the Kickstart problem and how you can ignore the story in that problem so that you can summarize the core problem and visualize it with a diagram. And you will note down the limits defined in the problem, which will help you for the implementation. And while solving it, you should always start with a simple solution, and you can improve upon the solution based on the special conditions of the data points that you see in the description, or how you understand and come up with some test cases. And then while coding, based on the data limits, you will use some of these data types, and also make sure that it is of sufficient the size, and also if it is heavily used and contributing to more to the memory, make sure that you use minimum that is needed and not overuse it like a bigger one which is not needed. And in the sample test case values given in the problem definition, it will normally give simple cases, so you should always think about all the corner cases and special cases, because that may be the tricky thing that many would have missed. And while testing, test the solution in the VS Code, then go to the Kickstart website and use the test run mode to test some of the test cases. And once everything passes with all cases that you have come up with, then submit your code. So don't worry if it seems like a complicated effort, or if you think you can't do it. Just start by participating, whether you can solve any problem or not. So just participate and just read all the 4 problems and just think about the problem, even if you can't solve any of them. At least see whether you can try one problem among those 4. That can be a starting point. And don't worry, like maximum is 100 marks that you can get. People might score 100 marks within 30 minutes of starting the competition. Even they won't take the 3 hours. If you're starting with these Kickstart, don't worry about those scores. You just target maybe starting with 1 or more points in your initial attempts. So just take the first step without worrying where your final score will be or your final rank. Good luck, and if you find this useful, please like, subscribe and share. And thanks for watching.